Betye Saar, who's made art for many years and was the first, to my way of thinking, African-American woman artist to become so enormously internationally successful. Betye, where did you start? Where did the art making start? Were you brought up in California?
Yes, I was born and raised in California, born in Los Angeles, raised in Pasadena, California. And making art, well, we wouldn't call it art, it was just drawing and painting and doing things with our hands. My family, my sister and brother and I, were very project oriented. From kids, we would go to summer camp and do crafts, and whenever we would get bored, we would always make something, making puppets, making dolls, making gifts for each other. And basically, I'm a child of the Depression, so we didn't have a lot of money, so we made things for each other. And my mother was a seamstress, my grandmother was a quilt maker, so that's just part of our heritage. Her mother, who died before I met her, painted china, so we always did things with our hands, and it just seemed like the normal thing to do.
When did you get into the fine arts?
I did design for a while. I made greeting cards, I did enamel jewelry. I decided to go back to school after being married with 2 children and went to Long Beach State and was studying, concentrating on interior design, working on a master's. And they were teaching printmaking there, and I was sort of seduced by printmaking and took a few classes and then just got in the role of doing printmaking. And then from that sort of merged into assemblage art, and it just sort of evolved, I guess, from design into printmaking into assemblage and sculpture and collage and what I do now.
And speaking about assemblages, what was the influence of the Watts Towers on your work? And please tell us a little bit about those early visits to the towers when you visited your grandmother.
Well, when I was young, my mother was a widow, and my paternal father's mother lived in Watts. So we would spend vacations there from school, and she had no car, she didn't drive. Her husband had a truck, but he used that for working. So we would go to market, which would be in the city of Watts. We would walk down the railroad tracks and passing the Watts Towers when Simon Rodia was actually building them. And I was always a kid who was impressed with fairy tales, a really big imagination. It still is big, but, but it was like with fairies and imaginary friends and all kinds of things, and that just seemed like a really magical place. And it wasn't until I was going to school down there one time that I sort of wandered around and found it myself and looked at it. But and then when I was an adult, I would go back and see it because it was all completed then.
Has the work always, since the beginning, dealt with your feelings about the African-American influence?
No. My earlier work sort of stemmed from my imagination and interested in the mystical and the occult and metaphysics. That was been my primary interest. And many of my early prints dealt with those themes. I have one called Phrenology Man and The Sorcerer's Window, and collecting all sorts of things that dealt with the other, you know, not anything negative, but mostly just the symbols, the formulas for making gold, for casting spells, for all of that. I was really interested in those kinds of graphic images. And so I would collect materials and put that together. My interest in African American evolved slower. In the 70s, I started collecting derogatory images. And that, of course, was after Martin Luther King's assassination and so forth, and all the horrifying images that you saw on television with the hoses and the dogs and the lynchings and all of that. And in collecting the derogatory images, I also found photographs of African Americans, and I started collecting those. And I think probably the earliest image that I have using an African American image or a black one was really the derogatory one, which was the liberation of Aunt Jemima.
Why Aunt Jemima? And explain who Aunt Jemima was, because we're seen in almost 70 countries now.
Aunt Jemima was a character that was named for the mammy character. The mammy was the servant, the female nurturer, and blacks were depicted either as an old man, the Uncle Tom, or the rebellious buck, or the young woman who was a harlot, or the older woman who was fat and unattractive, who was the mammy. Those were the roles that blacks were given to play. And then there was a product for making pancakes, and they had this woman demonstrate that, and she was called Aunt Jemima. The product was called Aunt Jemima Pancakes. There's whole books written about that, but she was still basically a servant and not very attractive. I have had some early not photographs, but images. I guess they were lithographs. You know, really big, bulging eyes, wide mammy mouth, and a scarf, and very big. And everyone thinks of Mammy from Gone with the Wind, but that was one character that was in that book. But that was part of the whole Southern thing. And she was, when slavery was abolished, well, not really abolished, but illegal, they kept those images, and blacks served as cookie jars, as salt and pepper shakers, but still in a role of servitude, you know, to wait on the whites. And I was inspired by that idea when I was asked to submit a piece for a exhibition up in the Bay Area in Oakland, and it was to do a piece about your heroes. And I wanted my hero to be a woman, and I wanted to do this piece about Aunt Jemima because I felt that she had been in a negative position long enough, and I wanted to empower her. And the image that I used was a notepad holder, which was the figure of a woman. Her apron was the pad where the paper went, and her hand was holding a pencil. And so, and the other hand was holding a broom. And so instead of the pencil, I put a rifle, and the other hand is holding a hand grenade. And where the apron was, I have a photograph of a mammy of a fist, an upright fist, which was at that time the power symbol, black power symbol. And so I called the piece The Liberation of Aunt Jemima, to liberate her from the negative context that she had played all these years, that role.
Do you think that was the beginning of the lead up to your breakthrough? I mean, you've shown all over the world.
That piece is known more than me. I mean, my name is there, but The Liberation of Aunt Jemima, it's like, the piece now is owned by the University of California, Berkeley Art Museum. And every month I get a request to give the copyrights for a book. It's their most requested piece to use that image. So the image is out there. So I feel really blessed that I have an image that's like a signature image that people know, that people recognize and know that that's the piece that Betye Saar did.
So you've really empowered that image. You've turned it around. You've
Yes.
turned her around. Her
Yes.
servitude.
But at the same time, it's still a derogatory image. Mm-hmm. But that idea sort of caught on into like flipping things around, which is like, it's an old song, I can't think of his name, but called Accentuate the Positive, Eliminate the Negative. Yes.
Betye, when you go across cultures with images like Aunt Jemima, how do they relate to it? Do you have to go into the historical aspects and then as a piece of art?
No, because I'm not really that much of a scholar. I deal with the visual thing and the emotional thing, and it's an emotional piece to look at that, you know, and especially if you had seen the things with the riots and the freedom marches in the South. You know, it's like you feel really vulnerable. I was a mom with 2 or 3 young children, So I couldn't go down and march. Some of my neighbors' sons went down south to march and protest, and I have friends who played music with those freedom rides. But what can a woman do that's home with 2 kids? And so that's, my art is my weapon in that case.
You use a lot of derogatory images in your work, and has that been a long time thing? Or did it begin with Jemima?
I see my work sort of divided into several areas. The metaphysical, which is the first, and it kind of goes in a spiral, and I come back to that, or sometimes I integrate it with other things. Then the black images, and they're divided into the derogatory or political pieces, or historical pieces, or autobiographical pieces using the black imagery. And then I sort of mix them up sometimes, like this piece that's behind me. Mm-hmm. This is a piece that I'm doing for a current exhibition called Colored, Consider the Rainbow, and it's about skin color and how people are judged by their skin color, and in my situation, how African Americans are judged by their skin color, and the names that are given to us, but mostly the names that we call ourselves. So it's like a racism within the race. And the one behind me is called Talalla, which is a light skin, a yellow tone to the skin, and the one next to it, the little assemblage there, is called Brown Schoolboy. Now that is a more political piece, but it isn't with a derogatory image. It's this lovely young man who's standing there with a book that's padlocked. And Jim Crow, because Jim Crow is still prevalent. There's still racism. I mean, right here in this city, what schools get the books and the teachers and the buildings and so forth, and which ones don't? Most kids go to private schools, if they can afford that, because there isn't the equality in schools. So they're all mixed together, and sometimes I concentrate on the derogatory images. Like I did a show in 1998 called The Return of Aunt Jemima, which I used a washboard format and used the derogatory images of Aunt Jemima.
Betty, where do you get your stuff to work with?
I walk looking down all the time and see things on down, you know, rusty tin and so forth. I go to flea markets, I go to garage sales, but when you see my studio, you know I've got enough of everything. And I always start out saying, I'm only going to use the things that I have here. I'm not going to buy anything new because I want to, like, it's all about recycling, you know. But materials give me my ideas.
Just go back a minute, because you mentioned a term which we all know in the States. Explain Jim Crow.
Well, Jim Crow comes from a variety of sources. And the image of Jim Crow was, from what I understand, a man who was sort of crippled, who danced to make his living, you know, and he did this sort of floppy, wiggly dance, and then a white minstrel took that dance and they sort of called it Jim Crow, and then somehow Jim Crow became the image of the bird, the black crow, and was a symbol of segregation. And there were Jim Crow laws, like blacks had to sit at the back of the bus or the back of the train or so forth. And I was watching a show about Rosa Parks, who was powerful in starting the liberation against segregation. And the bus would come to the curb and these women would say, "We're not getting on this bus till Jim Crow gets off." So I said, then Jim Crow became like a person, like this whole image, but the symbol of Jim Crow is a black crow. So that's the code, you know. So that's why Jim Crow, the black crow, is riding on the boat, watching time, watching education.
I find that you're very affecting to students, to young people. Very informally, I showed your work in Namibia to some of the young art students, and there was a sense of really being able to absorb what you were doing. And it was wonderful to see how you went across cultures and the found objects.
Well, that's one of the things that I try to do, and I don't know if I'm successful or not, because we're dealing in something that you really can't verbalize on. It's about feeling, and it's about spreading the spirit, and that spirit is universal, you know, about caring, I can't even verbalize on what it is. I once had a really nice compliment at a show, and an older man came up to me and he says, "I've never seen your work before, but I really like it." And he starts beating his heart, you know, like it touched him that way. And that's what I want my work to do, to like reach out and grab you somewhere.
When you talk about the mystical in your work, because we're going globally, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's about feelings and ideas and things that come to you that maybe don't have a logical explanation, or well, because I also include dreaming in that, you know, other altered states of consciousness that are natural, and trying to communicate on that level, trying to find materials that inspire that in me, putting them together so they communicate something else. Like, for example, this painting behind me. It's part of this series on colored in high yellow, but that's only part of it, because it also has something to do with, like, there's a tree, if you see the tree coming up through it. So the roots would be like what roots the black people from Africa, like this could be Mother Africa. It goes up, and in the belly, in the emotional chakra, right there, is a mass that's an African mass. So I said, well, this is high yellow with Africa in the belly. You know, that you can't really ignore what your roots are, that your roots are part of, regardless of what color your skin turns, and you still have those roots. And then it turns into a tree, so it's like woman tree, which is a kind of spirit figure too. Not so much of Africa, but maybe more in Scandinavia, where they have the spirits that are in the trees and so forth. And then it also has to do with death and rebirth. It has leaves that are embedded, and they're dry, dead leaves. And then like the freedom and life of a bird, of going out into the branches. And also the top color is lavender, which is the color of the spiritual chakra. So it goes through all of these colors, and it's still a figure, it's still a dress, it's still all of that, but it's all that transformation that, so when I say metaphysical, it's about the things that you really don't think about all the time, but are really part of your life anyway.
You have two daughters that are very successful artists in themselves. Were they raised to be artists? Did they pick it up? Have you ever done work for them or about them?
They were raised like I was raised, making things. You know, you always did something with your hands. They went to craft classes, they went to Barnsdall. They were always interested in art because their dad is also an artist. So we always had art materials. We always went to art exhibitions. You know, that was just, they say, well, you know, our family business is art. You know, their father is an art restorer and their mother's an artist. That's our family business, they say. They married men who are sensitive to that. Well, Tom is an artist too. And Leslie's husband, August, is also an artist, but he's into film too. But that's our lean, you know. We didn't go into law, we didn't go into other things, we went into art. And I think both of them sort of fought against it. Allison was interested in art history, non-Western art history, and then she started doing studio things, and Leslie was interested in communications, writing, like Tracy is. And then, you know, they said, well, my sister's in it, my mother does it, but sooner or later it gets them, and they do it. We have had some collaborative exhibitions, and we have one that's coming up in 2005 that's originating in I think it's the Auckland Museum in North Carolina.
There's a sense of timelessness in a way about your studio and all the work that's here, and yet it is in time, and there are clocks. Are you interested in time and timelessness?
Well, that's one of the symbols that I use about, that kind of goes over to the metaphysical thing, and it's mostly about timelessness, because when I use the pieces, well, that one, I can't tell, there's a little watch face down at the bottom of the boat. Sometimes they don't have hands, they're clocks that they don't have hands. And the reason that the clocks are out, because I was looking for a piece to go on top of an assemblage that I was making that I wanted to use, but it had to be a certain color and a certain shape, and so that's why they're all on array. But yes, the things that I use that I consider my personal visual language are hands, eyes, especially something that relates to the mystic eye or the all-seeing eye, the heart. I rarely use a full figure, but I use parts of it, like the hand for telling your fortune, like the lines in your hand, that would be the mystical or metaphysical part. Phrenology charts, feet, but certain symbols I'm really attracted to. And if I'm someplace and I see that, I will buy that. You know, if I'm at a swap meet and there's like a chart of a hand, I will buy that, because that's what I collect to use.
Betty, have you ever worked in the theater, like designing sets or productions?
Costumes. Yes, right after my divorce, I wanted a job, so I went to the theater and said, you know, I would like to design costumes. And then I got this job, you know, as an assistant designer, because one of the things that I had learned growing up was sewing. My mother was a seamstress. We made doll clothes. We made our own clothes. And I liked the theater, so part of my little assemblages are like little theaters, you know, little sets with the characters in them and everything. Yeah, that's how I earned money.
Well, like sets or stories, and you write as well.
Well, the writing, you know, that's my statement, you know. But I don't. But it's true. Titles are important to me, and that the piece tells a story is important. My secret heart is seduced by twilight. It remembers the colors of dreams. It longs for solitude and the exotic. My secret heart is a wanderer. It sails the sea of imagination. It soars beyond the clouds, seeking the mysterious. It moves through time, dream time, and space, mind space. My secret heart seeks the dusty, musty, forgotten corners. It constantly haunts, hunts, collects, gathers objects, images, feelings. It mixes, matches, embellishes, simplifies, camouflages, fabricates to empower the ordinary, to invent artifacts. My secret heart bridges memory and vision. It pays homage to lost rituals of unknown civilizations. It expands horizons only to condense them into a frame, a box, a room. My secret heart is ageless. It beats within the rainbow babe in the woods, and it dwells in the house of whispers. There are about 6 pieces that are titles of works there in here. Rainbow Babe in the Woods, House of Whispers is an installation, and Dreamtime, In Search of Dreamtime. So this started out as a lecture of like reading this and showing a slide really quickly. So it illustrates that.
Has there ever been a volume published with just the poems? Or are they an integral part of the installation so that
well, they
happen?
keep changing as the lecture changes, as I do different work. But that's one of the things I'd like to do. You know, and not only just my poems, but sometimes people have written poetry about my pieces. Yeah, that's nice too.
Yeah, that's a good idea. You use language like your assemblages. The words are so beautiful, they're an object in themselves.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that comes across in the reading. It's really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
To your left is a mannequin. Is this going to be a new piece, or are you back to costume designing?
No, we are doing this piece, and it's an idea that I had a long time. If I can see it, the date of this sketch is October 15th, 1999. So you see time is passing. But only just earlier this year I found it, and the piece is called Morning Skirt. In, I guess, the 1800s, photographers advertised that there are photographers by having their work on garments or those sandwich boards or something like that. So I want to do this piece. I hate to talk about it because in case I don't do it. But a skirt that's black, and the photos on it are photos of slaves. That's why we have the chains there. Let's see if I have a sketch here of what it is. Yeah. Photos of slaves being punished. It's not a happy thing. All the cruel kinds of inventions that they invented. You know, like there's one that a man is rolled up into a ball and then beaten, you know, or things that go on their wrists to keep them from, or on their legs to keep them from running away. When the slaves were transported from Africa to this country, there is, and I've done pieces of that, of the slave ship, and it's a diagram of the slave ship. The children are all in smaller quarters all together. The women are all together. The men, the women I think are chained maybe hand to wrist. Men are chained one ankle to the ankle of the man next to them, and the wrist the same way. That's the way they're chained, standing up, no room to sit down or lie down. It's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible. So, oh, I see an image down there. So that's like one of the ways that I deal with the pain of that particular part of African American history. And so I wanted to make this skirt with maybe a blue ruffle that was like a train, that would be like a, if you know fabric, there's something called moire, taffeta moire, which has a watermark on it, you know, to be like the water or the waves of the ocean. So it's called morning skirt, to mourn. And so it just sits there. And then some of this images I make are like ritual-like altars. So those are all waiting to be made. And the pieces up above are the chairs that were part of the installation in Sao Paulo. They were chairs of the souls of the lost children or the abandoned children that are in Brazil. You know, during that time, and there was lots of items in the newspaper about the children, how they were abused and so forth. They were just, you know, out there. So this is the soul system. Some of them have photographs. Some of them have spirit bottles on them. And that was part of that installation.
Is a spirit bottle a Betye Saar invention, or is there actually something
It's
called
an African thing of the spirit to, and it's like most or many metaphysical things. There's like the trickster. It's positive and negative. You know, the glass attracts the negative image and it's captured in there. Also, it attracts a spirit that's positive to go and visit that house. And that custom came over to the United States, and still in parts of the South, they have trees where bottles are out there too. Either it's called, Robert Ferris Thomas wrote about the flash of the spirit. That's what it is, the sun or the light reflecting on the glass for the spirit to attract a benevolent spirit, to repel or capture a negative spirit.
I'm struck by your kindness, by your compassion. Your work has so much caring in it. You're honoring that great loss, and even with this, the slave piece and the punishment.
And I think a lot of my work has the element of loss, but I don't see it as a negative thing, because it's like the derogatory images. It's like transforming it or turning it around or
releasing it in some way.
Yeah, releasing it, right. That's true.
Is there anything that you would like us to know?
That I'm very happy making art. That that, you know, if you have to do something, you know, like I've really been blessed and fortunate that the jobs that I've had have some kind of creative aspect to them. Some of them have been really hard. Once I was set designer for a film in Washington State, and I had to make a coal mine, and that was really grimy, grubby, dirty work. But it didn't last forever, you know. And sometimes it's boring, but when there's a lot of pressure, like this particular show, to get these things wrapped and out today, is a kind of anxiety time. But most of the time, I'm here and putzing around, and I'm really blessed that I have a good imagination, and one thing leads to another. If people watch this that are interested in the arts, that it's a good business to be in. But I think you have to have the technique, you have to have some technical skills. It's not all brain. A lot of the art now is just about the concept of the thing. But heart and spirit have a lot to do with it for longevity.
Well, Betye Saar, you are filled with heart and spirit. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.